I grew up in the middle of a small rural town, 1,000 people approximately in the town, and I lived right smack dab in the middle of the town, right by Main Street.
You probably know Dr. Jan Pol from his popular Nat Geo Wild show, The Incredible Doctor Pol. But behind his success is someone just as important, his wife, Diane Pol. From their early days as a young couple to building a veterinary clinic and becoming reality TV stars,
Euthanasias are probably the hardest part of Jan's job. Even though he knows that it's best for the animal, it's never easy.
Diane has been there every step of the way. Lately, though, she's been facing serious health challenges. So, what really happened to Dr. Pol's wife? Let's take a closer look at how Diane Pol breaks in tears and reveals huge announcement on her husband.
I watch your show all the time, and something I've always been curious about is, do the cameras ever get in the way when treating an animal?
If you ever want to watch behind the scenes, do it.
The beginning of the Pols. Diane Pol, born in February of 1943 in Michigan, was the kind of person everyone gravitated toward. Kind, sharp, and filled with a quiet warmth. Even as a child, she had this calm curiosity about animals, especially ducks, which she'd spend hours watching by the local pond, like they were her personal soap opera. She also had this rock-solid academic streak, which eventually led her to earn a master's degree in special reading. She became a teacher and stayed in the profession for years, helping kids find their footing in the world of books. But then, just when life seemed set on a quiet, steady path, it took a turn. As a teenager, Diane met a boy from halfway across the world. Jan Pol, a Dutch exchange student from the Netherlands, landed right in her hometown, and believe it or not, he ended up staying with her family. Sounds like the plot of a movie, right? Two teenagers, one foreign, one local, crossing paths by chance. But this wasn't just a summer fling. Their bond grew quickly and deeply, first through friendship, then through a quiet kind of love that only got stronger with time. And the best part was that they both had this deep, unshakable love for animals. That connection became the spark for a relationship that would span more than 5 decades. Despite their totally different backgrounds, Diane from small-town Michigan and Jan from rural Holland, they connected over values that really mattered. They both believed in hard work, education, and building something lasting. Their dates weren't candlelit dinners or fancy outings. Instead, they took long walks, had deep conversations, and dreamed together. They encouraged each other constantly. Diane supported Jan's goal of becoming a veterinarian, while he cheered her on as she pursued her own teaching career. By 1967, they made it official, tying the knot in a heartfelt wedding ceremony that marked not just the start of a marriage, but a full-on partnership. They were in love, but it was more than that. Their union would go on to shape not just their family, but a veterinary empire neither of them could have predicted. Now here's where the real adventure begins. After getting married, they made a bold move and relocated to the Netherlands so Jan could complete his veterinary training. And it wasn't easy. Diane had to learn a new language and adjust to a completely different culture. Essentially, she had to build a new life from scratch. But she never once backed down from the challenge. She stood by Jan, every step of the way. Once Jan completed his studies, they moved back to Michigan and got to work building their life together. Diane started teaching at Harbor Beach Elementary School, while Jan began his career as a veterinarian. And just like that, the seeds of what would become the Pol Veterinary Services were planted. The birth of Pol Veterinary Services. Now, Diane and Jan weren't chasing fame. All they wanted was to build a meaningful life doing something they loved. Back in 1981, they opened Pol Veterinary Services with no fanfare, just grit, hard work, and a shared dream. The clinic was small, with nothing flashy, but what it lacked in size, it made up for in passion. Jan was out there performing life-saving treatments with his hands elbow-deep in hay, while Diane kept everything in the background humming like a well-oiled machine. But here's the thing, this wasn't just a business for them. Jan handled all kinds of animals with the utmost care, diagnosing and treating ailments like bloating in cattle and dogs who were limping. While Diane wasn't in the spotlight, every success the clinic saw rested squarely on her quiet, steady shoulders. And as they were building this professional empire, something deeply personal was unfolding too. Diane and Jan wanted to grow their family, but when they found out they couldn't have biological children, they made a decision that showed the depth of their hearts. They chose to adopt, and not just once. They opened their home and hearts to 3 children, Kathy, Charles, and Diane Jr. Their house was full of laughter, chaos, animals, paperwork, and above all, love. You can imagine how hectic things must have been. Raising 3 kids is no joke, especially while running a clinic that never really closes its doors. Emergencies came in at all hours, farm visits meant long drives, and yet, Diane managed to keep the whole operation balanced. She was a full-time mom and a full-time business manager, and somehow, she made it all look effortless. But the most interesting twist in this story didn't come from a medical case or a family milestone. It came from their son, Charles. As he grew up watching his dad care for animals in muddy barns, and his mom juggle 10 tasks at once with a smile, Charles realized something the world hadn't yet caught on to. This life, their life, was something special. It wasn't glamorous, but it was authentic, and it was worth sharing. So Charles started shopping around an idea that revolved around a documentary-style series about his dad, the old-school vet doing things the way few others still did. House calls, farm visits, no-frills medicine. But here's where things get tricky. Television executives weren't biting. They didn't find enough drama in what was being offered. But Charles didn't give up. He kept pitching, and finally, in 2011, Nat Geo Wild took a chance. That's when the Incredible Doctor Pol was born, and suddenly, everything changed. Overnight, this humble clinic in Michigan became the backdrop for a show that millions would fall in love with. Viewers were hooked, not because of high-tech gadgets or dramatic surgeries, but because of the raw, relatable dedication of a man who treated animals with practical skill and deep compassion. And though Jan was clearly the star, the camera could never quite capture the full magic without Diane's invisible presence in every frame. Even when she wasn't front and center, her fingerprints were everywhere. Diane kept the business side running like clockwork. She made sure appointments were scheduled, records were filed, and the phones were answered with a reassuring voice. She was the reason Jan could focus on medicine without worrying if the clinic was falling apart behind him. And let's not forget, viewers didn't just admire her efficiency, they felt something when they saw her. Diane brought this quiet warmth that balanced out Jan's gruff but lovable demeanor. You could see the way clients relaxed when she spoke to them, how the staff looked to her when chaos struck. She wasn't just the backbone of the clinic, she was its heartbeat. But as the seasons passed and the show evolved, fans started noticing something. Diane was appearing less and less on screen, and naturally, questions started swirling. Was she okay? Had something happened? What was going on behind those clinic doors when the cameras stopped rolling? It turns out, life off-screen was shifting. Trouble behind the scenes. While the camera showed happy endings and animal miracles, there was another story playing out behind the scenes. Filming a reality show while running a full-time veterinary practice is no easy task. Every day was unpredictable, and the emergencies didn't care whether there was a crew present or not. The long hours started to add up, and while Dr. Pol was juggling animals and interviews, Diane was the one holding the rest of the puzzle together. The success of the Incredible Dr. Pol wasn't just about Jan's skills as a veterinarian. It was about the incredible bond between him and Diane, and they built a legacy that reached millions. But that's what made what happened next so difficult to watch. In 2019, fans began to notice something unusual. It happened in an episode called Beauty and the Bees. It was subtle, so brief that you could miss it if you blinked, but it left a lasting impression. Diane appeared on screen for just a moment, and she was wearing a neck brace. She looked like she was struggling to stand upright, and while she smiled through it, something clearly wasn't right. There was no context, no explanation, just that brief image, and then silence. The episode aired, and suddenly, fans were left with questions and no answers. What happened to Diane? She had always been the unshakable rock of the show, strong, composed, and always in control. So seeing her like that, even for just a few seconds, was jarring. Her absence in the episode felt bigger than just screen time. It left a void, and that silence after the episode only made it more unnerving. When she returned in the following episode, smiling, laughing, and seemingly back to her usual self, fans breathed a collective sigh of relief. Everything looked normal again, or so it seemed. But underneath that sense of comfort, there was still a quiet unease. Her struggles weren't over, and deep down, fans knew it. Over the following months, Diane began appearing less and less on the show. Hospital visits quietly replaced her daily routines. And although those closest to the family remained tight-lipped, the message was clear. Diane was going through something difficult. Her health was in decline, and the woman who had spent her life supporting everyone else was now the one in need of support. Yet even then, Diane's strength never wavered. She showed up when she could, and when she couldn't, her presence still lingered through the way the clinic ran, the way the staff spoke of her, and the way Jan continued to lean on her spirit even in her physical absence. Her story became deeply personal for those who followed her, because in watching Diane push through, in seeing her return despite the pain, fans saw a reflection of their own struggles. She reminded people that strength isn't always loud or fearless. Sometimes it's quiet, persistent, and shows up even when it hurts to keep going. Diane's hospital visits broke hearts, but they also brought people together. Letters poured in, messages of support, stories of inspiration, and fans sending back the love she had given them for so long. Her journey became something more than a subplot. It became a thread connecting viewers across continents, people rooting for her not just as a character, but as a human being. But even as Diane fought her battles, another chapter in the Pol family's story was quietly drawing to a close. After more than a decade on the air, the Incredible Doctor Pol aired its final episode. It was a bittersweet moment, one that marked the end of an era. The show first premiered on the 29th of October in the year 2011, and it officially ended on the 6th of July, 2024. 13 years, over 200 episodes, countless animals treated, millions of hearts touched. The battles of the Incredible Doctor Pol. What most people don't realize is that reality television, even when it feels heartwarming and wholesome like The Incredible Doctor Pol, comes with its own unique challenges. Sure, the show was celebrated for being real, for showing rural vet work in its rawest, most relatable form. But with that authenticity came criticism too. A lot of people weren't fans of Dr. Pol's traditional hands-on veterinary techniques. He came from the old school, and he was practical, experienced, and focused on doing what worked. But in a world where modern veterinary medicine leans heavily on new technology and protocol, not everyone saw eye to eye. That criticism didn't just stay on message boards either. It led to legal complaints, scrutiny from veterinary boards, and media attention that placed even more pressure on the family. Imagine loving what you have done for over 40 years, helping thousands of animals, and suddenly having to justify every move you make. The weight of that spotlight, though often full of praise, sometimes felt like a burden. So when the show finally wrapped up, it wasn't just an ending. It was a breath of fresh air. After years of giving everything to the clinic, to the show, and to the community, Diane and Dr. Pol were finally able to take a step back, to rest, and to be a couple again. They could now enjoy time with family without worrying about cameras, deadlines, or public perception. However, there was one particular incident that almost put an end to the Incredible Dr. Pol. The case that almost ended everything. Behind the scenes, things took a serious turn, one that could have ended his entire career. And it all started with a complaint, not a lawsuit and not a full-on scandal, just one owner, one case, and one accusation. But that was enough to put his license and reputation on the line. Now here's the part that gets real. Whenever a pet owner files a complaint, even if it's misguided or exaggerated, the door swings wide open for a full-blown investigation by your state's veterinary board. And once that door is open, your license and your ability to keep doing what you love is suddenly at risk. It doesn't matter if you've helped thousands of animals or if your clients love you. One unhappy owner can trigger the kind of scrutiny that feels impossible to fight. So back to Dr. Pol. The case that nearly cost him his career involved a Boston Terrier named Mr. Pigglesworth. After performing surgery and treating the dog, Dr. Pol was reported to the Michigan Department of Licensing and Regulatory Affairs, also known as the DLRA. They reviewed the case and found Dr. Pol guilty of not meeting the minimum standards of veterinary care. He was officially censured. But here's where the plot twists. Mr. Pigglesworth made a full recovery. That's right, the dog survived, got better, and went home. So why the penalty? Why the public scolding? According to the board, it wasn't about the outcome. They claimed it was about the process. And while it's true that recovery doesn't always prove perfect care, this situation had more layers than anyone expected. Dr. Pol decided to fight back, and he took the case to the Michigan Court of Appeals. That's when things started to get messy. First, the court found that Dr. Pol was labeled negligent and incompetent, even though there was no lasting harm to the animal. The court acknowledged that yes, success doesn't automatically equal good medicine, but it also questioned how a single positive outcome could be so easily dismissed when it was the only case used to prove alleged incompetence. That's when a major flaw in the system became clear. Veterinary boards often base disciplinary decisions on just one incident. But think about it. Veterinarians treat hundreds, sometimes thousands of animals each year. No one can expect perfect outcomes in every case. And most complaints come from emotional moments when the outcome wasn't what the owner hoped for. Should a vet's entire career hang in the balance over one incident? The court didn't think so. But there's more. The DLRA's entire argument against Dr. Pol hinged on two vaguely worded laws. These provisions didn't list specific requirements. They just said things like negligent conduct or failure to exercise due care. From there, they brought in expert witnesses who gave their opinion that Dr. Pol's methods didn't meet some set standards. That sounds like shaky ground, right? The court thought so too. They ruled that if there's no law stating you must wear gloves, use a specific anesthesia, or administer intravenous fluids, then failing to do so doesn't automatically make you guilty of anything. A standard of care, the court said, has to be clearly written, widely accepted, and publicly available before anyone can be penalized for not following it. Basically, if the rules aren't spelled out, how can you be punished for breaking them? What's worse is that the DLRA even introduced charges during the trial that weren't part of the original complaint. That's a huge violation of due process. You can't blindside someone in court. Every person, veterinarian or not, has the right to know exactly what they're being accused of so they can prepare a proper defense. But the DLRA broke that basic rule by bringing in new allegations mid-trial. The court called them out and made it clear that kind of move isn't justified. One of the most eye-opening moments of the case came when Dr. Pol explained that the dog's owner had capped the treatment budget at $300. If he couldn't stay within that budget, the owner said the dog would be euthanized. Now here's where things got even more complicated. The DLRA argued that costs should never influence whether minimum standards of care are met, but the court disagreed. In fact, they said that in veterinary medicine, unlike human medicine, cost is a very real and legitimate factor. A vet has to work with what the client can afford, and that reality affects the kind of treatment options available. In the end, the court ruled in favor of Dr. Pol. They concluded that there was no solid legal basis for his conviction. The evidence used against him wasn't clear or substantial. The so-called violations weren't violations at all, and the court had no choice but to throw out the entire case. Things finally cleared up for Dr. Pol to move on, but not for long. A devastating injury. Just as they were entering what should have been their peaceful chapter, another major event shook their world once again. Diane suffered another injury, this time far more serious than anything before. And what made it even more mysterious was how it was described. According to reports, Diane claimed the injury was caused by a train wreck. But here's where things get confusing. No public records confirmed any train accident involving her. Some believe she may have used the term metaphorically, describing how severe and chaotic the injury felt, rather than pointing to an actual crash. Whatever the cause, what was undeniable was the impact. This was not a minor bump in the road. Diane's injury, particularly to her back, left her in chronic, often excruciating pain. And when you're older, recovering from something like that isn't just about healing. It's about learning to live differently. Diane, who had always been active and independent, suddenly found even basic tasks difficult, and that was heartbreaking to watch. Her condition began to change the energy around her. Those closest to her started expressing quiet concern. Some whispered words no one wanted to say aloud. Are we losing her? The weight of her struggle felt unbearable at times. For the first time, it seemed like the woman who had been everyone else's rock needed one of her own. On March 15th, 2024, Diane underwent surgery to address the damage in her back. It was a serious procedure, one that required her to stay in the hospital for a full week afterward, under close observation. But the real challenge came after the surgery. The recovery was grueling. It involved long hours of physical therapy, follow-up treatments, and days that pushed her to the edge. But Diane wasn't alone. Through it all, Dr. Pol was by her side. Decades of marriage had brought them through nearly every trial you could imagine, and this was just another test of their resilience. He stayed with her, supported her, and encouraged her, never once letting go. And that kind of loyalty and quiet commitment says everything about the foundation they built their life on. This chapter of their story wasn't filmed. There were no cameras, no episodes, no theme music, just two people navigating pain, healing, and the kind of love that doesn't need to be put on display to be powerful. As Diane worked her way back toward recovery, something beautiful happened. Fans from all over the world, people who had never met her but felt like they knew her, began reaching out. Letters poured in, emails, messages of encouragement, prayers, and well wishes. After all the years she had spent caring for others, behind the scenes and on screen, the world was returning the love. Even though the show had ended, the legacy Diane and Dr. Pol created was still very much alive. The clinic in Michigan didn't shut down when the cameras did. It's still there, still helping animals, still serving the community with the same dedication and heart it always had. And while Dr. Pol may not be performing as many procedures himself these days, he remains involved, mentoring the next generation of vets and making sure the clinic stays true to its roots. Meanwhile, reruns of The Incredible Doctor Pol continue to find new fans. Younger viewers stumble upon the show and get hooked. Longtime fans rewatch their favorite episodes like comfort food. The Pol family's story keeps reaching people, one home at a time. Diane's injury didn't just heal on its own, though. Life kept going, but Diane was still suffering. How the Pols' lives evolved. After her injury, Diane was thrown into a rehabilitation process that was anything but easy. It wasn't just a matter of getting some rest and taking it slow. Every day involved medical evaluations, physical therapy sessions, and learning new ways to go about the most basic tasks. Pain management became part of her daily routine, and she had to be very careful, as even the smallest wrong motion could set her back. And all of this was happening quietly, behind the scenes, during the final stretch of the show's airing. Now, if you noticed Diane's reduced presence in the last few episodes, you weren't imagining it. There was a reason. Her body was asking her to slow down, and for someone who had spent her whole life putting others first, including animals, family, and community, it was time she put herself at the top of that list. As much as it hurt to step away, one thing became clear. The show needed to pause, not just for Diane, but for the whole family to refocus on what really mattered: health, time, and healing. But if you think Diane took her foot off the gas completely, think again. Even while dealing with pain and reduced mobility, she stayed determined to regain her independence. With her family and medical team by her side, she made slow but steady progress. The discomfort didn't vanish overnight, but Diane adapted. She found new rhythms, and perhaps most importantly, she discovered the value of simply being, of waking up each morning beside her husband and embracing life at a gentler pace. Meanwhile, Dr. Pol, known for his relentless work ethic and non-stop clinic life, took on a new role. He became Diane's primary support system, always nearby, always attentive. Sure, he still worked at the clinic in a limited capacity, but his priorities shifted. Diane came first. It was one of those quiet, powerful moments where love doesn't need to be shouted. It's felt in every action, every shared meal, every walk down the hall where he steadied her hand without saying a word. So, what does life look like for them now? Today, Diane and Dr. Pol are living a much slower, more peaceful life compared to their whirlwind years in front of the camera. The clinic, of course, is still running. It's never really stopped, but they've scaled back their day-to-day responsibilities, entrusting their dedicated team to carry the torch forward. These are people who trained under Dr. Pol, learned from his experience, and now honor his legacy by continuing his work with the same care and passion. Dr. Pol still makes appearances at the clinic, offering advice and overseeing cases here and there, but he's no longer the man rushing out the door every 5 minutes. Instead, he's found a balance. His passion for animals hasn't faded one bit, but now he recognizes the value in stepping back, enjoying the quiet moments, and being present with his wife. The two of them still live in their beloved Michigan, in the same rural community they've served for decades. Their home, surrounded by farmland and wide-open skies, is a true sanctuary. No cameras, no scripts, no set schedules, just the two of them enjoying the simplicity of everyday life. They take in the changing seasons, tend to their own pets, and share slow, meaningful moments that had been rare during the busy years. Despite her back injury and the limitations it's caused, Diane remains remarkably active in the ways that count. She's not one to sit still and dwell. Instead, she finds joy in small things, like spending time with her children and especially her grandchildren. Those kids light up her world. She loves hearing about their day, watching them grow, and passing down bits of wisdom from her own journey. Even though the show is no longer filming, Diane hasn't vanished from the public eye. She still connects with fans online, sharing updates and reminiscing about her favorite moments. Whether it's through social media posts, heartfelt messages, or old photos from the show, she keeps the bond alive. For over a decade, people welcome Diane into their homes, and she hasn't forgotten that. Now, she returns that love with the same openness she's always shown. Dr. Pol, while easing into retirement, still lights up at the chance to work with animals. His hands may not be as busy as they once were, but his mind remains sharp. And the younger vets at Pol Veterinary Services? They're lucky to have him. His guidance, experience, and calm demeanor continue to shape how the clinic operates. He may not be the face on TV anymore, but his spirit is deeply woven into the work they do every day. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.